the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network presents Vatican Insider with Joan Lewis. Each week, Joan brings you news from inside the Vatican and the Church around the world, as well as interviews and answers to your questions. Now, here's the host of Vatican Insider, Joan Lewis.
Welcome to Vatican Insider on yet another scorching weekend in so many parts of the world. I hope you're staying cool as you listen to the program this week, especially the interview segment with my two special guests. As you know, Sunday, July 28th, the Church marks the World Day of Grandparents and the Elderly. Thus, this weekend and next, in the interview segment, I reprise a conversation I had with Catherine Wiley, grandmother and founder of Catholic Grandparents Association, CGA, and Marilyn Henry, who coordinates CGA in the United States. Both women are grandmothers, and both have exceptional lives and stories. As you will hear, Catherine was truly the catalyst for this now annual World Day. Enjoy. Heartfelt congratulations to all grandparents, and congrats also to the many senior citizens of the world who act as grandparents for the younger generations. By the way, the Vatican Thursday announced that the Apostolic Penitentiary is granting a plenary indulgence for the faithful who take part in the World Day for Grandparents and the Elderly on July 28th under the usual conditions of sacramental confession, reception of the Eucharist, and prayer for the intentions of the Holy Father. But first, a few news highlights. As you know, Pope Francis spends July as a kind of working vacation in the Vatican, occasionally receiving guests or penning a message to some group or organization. The weekly general audiences are suspended, but he does appear at the Sunday Angelus. In fact, last Sunday, July 14th, during his Angelus reflections, Pope Francis referred to the day's Gospel, which recounts Jesus sending his disciples 2 by 2 on mission and advising them to take only what is necessary. Let's pause for a moment on this image, said Francis. The disciples are sent together and must take only what is necessary with them. The Pope called on the faithful to draw closer to Christ by bringing with them only the essentials. To experience fully God's joy and love, let go of that unnecessary baggage which only weighs us down and hinders the journey. We need to go without the superfluous in such a way that everyone has what they need to live with dignity and to contribute actively to the mission. Monday, July 15th, Pope Francis met in the morning with members of 6 religious congregations: the Minims, Clerics Regular Minor, Augustinian Sisters of Divine Love, Clerics of St. Viator, Reparatrix Sisters of the Sacred Heart, and the Missionary Sisters of St. Anthony Mary Claret. They're all in Rome for general or provincial chapters. Francis asked how many novices they have, and he warned them that without children, their orders will die. He called on them to pray for vocations that will carry their charisms into the future. Wednesday, July 17th. In a message to a gathering of youth ministers in Asunción, Paraguay, Pope Francis called on the young faithful to let Christ transform them and to live their youth as a gift for Jesus and for the world. Let Christ transform your natural optimism into authentic love, a love that knows how to sacrifice, that is sincere, real, and genuine, so that your youth will be a gift for Jesus and for the world, and you will be able to spend your life in a worthy and fruitful way. Francis emphasized the value of youth ministry for the Church, as he called on young people to let Christ use their energy to do great things. The command of Jesus to arise, he said, means both a task and a responsibility. Also July 17th. July 17, 2024 marks the 1500th anniversary of the veneration of the image of Santa Maria in Portico, or protector of the Eternal City. In a letter to Father Antonio Piccolo, Rector General of the Order of the Clerics Regular of the Mother of God, who have been custodians of the image since 1601, Francis expressed his joy for the occasion. He noted that devotion to Santa Maria in Portugal began with a miraculous appearance of the Mother of God on July 17, 524, in the home of Santa Galla, a Roman noblewoman. It was witnessed by Pope St. John I, who transformed the portico into a Marian sanctuary and a charity hospice. The Holy Virgin revealed herself in what was a particularly difficult moment for the Church, extending her mantle over Pope John I, who would suffer and die for peace without renouncing his faith, becoming a hostage to political conspiracies and fratricidal wars. Given the current scenario, Francis asked, how can we not grasp the urgency of promoting peace, of praying for peace? Thursday, July 18th. Pope Francis, as he does every year, paid a special visit to the children and staff of the Vatican summer camp for the children of Vatican employees. Despite intense Roman aid during the 8:30 a.m. visit, the Holy Father visited the camp outside of Vatican City and engaged in dialogue with the children and the teens. Friday, July 19th, the Vatican released Pope Francis's message for the Olympic Games, addressed to Archbishop Laurent Ulrich of Paris. He expressed his hope that the Paris Olympics will be, for all those who come from all countries of the world, an opportunity not to be lost, to discover and appreciate each other, to break down prejudices, to create esteem where there is contempt and distrust, friendship where there is hatred. The Olympic Games, wrote the Pope, are by nature bearers of peace and not of war. Well, those are the news highlights of the week, but now stay right here for part one of my talk with Catherine Wiley and Marilyn Henry about the World Day of Grandparents and the Elderly.
This is Father Joseph Aitona from the Fathers of Mercy. We need Catholic radio to spread the truths of Jesus Christ and His Church. The more we feed our souls with good, solid, orthodox content, which is faithful to the magisterium of the Church, the more we can love God and spread that love to our neighbor.
The world needs EWTN Catholic Radio, now more than ever.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
EWTN has just increased my faith so much. I am a cradle Catholic, and I thought I knew my faith very well. When Mother Angelica passed away, and it was so much in the news, I learned all about EWTN and started listening all the time. And my eyes have been opened to my faith so much.
Welcome back to Vatican Insider. Here's Joan Lewis.
Sunday, July 28th, the Church marks the World Day of Grandparents and the Elderly. Thus, this weekend and next, in the interview segment of Vatican Insider, I reprised a conversation I had with Catherine Wiley, grandmother and founder of Catholic Grandparents Association, and Marilyn Henry, who coordinates CGA in the United States. Both women are grandmothers, and both have exceptional lives and stories. As you will hear, Catherine was truly the catalyst for this now annual World Day. Enjoy. Well, I want to welcome my listeners to Vatican Insider to one of the most special editions you are ever going to hear, because I am sitting in my Rome office with two amazing people, but beyond being amazing, I'm blessed to have them as my friends. And I'm talking about Catherine Wiley, who founded the Catholic Grandparents Association, our focus this weekend. And I'm talking about Marilyn Henry, and she is head of the U.S. offices of Catholic Grandparents Association. You really coordinate the CGA in the United States. Now, to add to their credentials, both are grandmothers. We wouldn't expect anything else, right? But I really wish there's two other people I'd love to bring into this conversation, and that is their amazing spouses. and they are waiting patiently in another room as we speak. So now Catherine and Marilyn and I met last year. We met 2020, and just before COVID struck the entire known world. They were in Rome for the Richness of Many Years of Life conference organized by the Dicastery for Laity, Family, and Life. It was a conference that brought together 550 participants from 60 countries. So I now want to say, Catherine and Marilyn, welcome back to Rome.
Oh, thank you so much, Joan, and we're so excited. We're so excited to be here on this very special occasion.
Absolutely an amazing weekend. And Marilyn,
yes,
welcome.
Yes, thank you so much, Joan, for offering to hear our story and hear our excitement about the World Day. We're so excited to be here.
But it's one of the best stories of the church, which is why I love it. Now, you are in Rome for this past weekend's amazing event, the first ever World Day for Grandparents and the Elderly. And as my listeners already know, Pope Francis loves the elderly. And from the beginning of his pontificate and on many occasions, he's emphasized their indispensable role in dialogue with young people, in the transmission of the faith, and in young people's rediscovery of their own roots. He's asked the elderly to become protagonists of our lives and, quote, not to pull the oars back into the boat. So, Catherine, you, as we're about to hear, are really the catalyst for this event. It was a dream of yours years ago, and you never, what I just said, pulled the oars back into the boat. So, first of all, what prompted you to found the Catholic Grandparents Association?
Oh, Joan, that's such a good story. The truth is, I really don't know exactly what prompted me, whether it was... I really don't know the complete answer to that, but I certainly know what started it. I live in England in a little shrine village called Walsingham, which is known as the Nazareth of England. And there's a small shrine where for 1,000 years pilgrims have come to give thanks and to ask for gifts for healings and to give thanks, as I say. And I've lived there for over 40 years. So pilgrimages were nothing new to me. I've seen the pilgrims come and go. And I'm Irish. I'm an Irish grandmother with 10 grandchildren. And I live very close to the Shrine of Our Lady of Knock in Ireland. So again, Shrines of Our Lady is something that's sort of bred in me. And I was at the Shrine in Walsingham on Our Lady's birthday on the 8th of September. And I was honestly just wondering what I would give for her birthday. What did Jesus give her? What would Joseph have made for her? What would she get? And thinking, what could you give her, this woman who had everything? And the idea came that a pilgrimage, a simple pilgrimage, to honour her mother and father, St. Joachim and St. Anne, the grandparents of Jesus, would totally delight her. And that was it. I then discovered that there wasn't one grandparents' pilgrimage in the whole world. So we started the first grandparents' pilgrimage, and from that point on, it really had a life of its own. It was sort of organic in a way. We then took it to Ireland, to the Shrine of Our Lady of Knock. And also, I'm very fortunate because we also lived part of the year in Palm Beach. So the third place was Palm Beach with Bishop Barbarito.
Oh, wow.
And so from that very small, simple beginning, the Catholic Grandparents Association grew out of the first pilgrimage. And we're in now a worldwide outreach in over 63 countries.
Absolutely.
So this weekend it's just 20 years of dreams and prayers and hopes by so many people.
Exactly. And we're going to look at the whole, each of how you even got the idea and passed it on for a World Day. So now, Marilyn, how did the two of you meet?
Yes, we met because of a brochure that Catherine left in the cathedral in London. My husband and I took a trip to England and visited the cathedral, and I was wandering around in the back, and I found a brochure that said, "Did you know Jesus had grandparents?" I picked it up and I sort of studied it, and I thought, wait a minute. I knew that St. Anne was Mary's mother, and my middle name is Anne. So she was very, very important to me, but I never thought of her as being Jesus' grandmother. So I brought the brochure back to my home in Texas at my parish, and I spoke to our pastor and then to parish council, and spoke to Catherine, and fell in love with the idea, felt called to it, and began a ministry in our parish.
That is such a wonderful story, and I think really, if I were to ask my listeners to write into me and say, did you really think about it? Did you know that Jesus had grandparents? Of course, he physically would have had grandparents. He had parents. But anyway, I think the grandparents is underestimated. So this was such a fantastic idea to promote not only knowledge of Jesus' grandparents, but the ties all of us have had or should have, certainly, the ties that should exist between parents, grandparents, and children. So I went on the website, which I'd been on before. This was not my first time. But your website, which is marvelous, it tells about grandparents. It tells us they are helping to pass on the faith and keep prayer at the heart of family life. And it was just my impression going through the website, which, by the way, is www, then altogether, CatholicGrandparentsAssociation.org. And by the way, it welcomes us with a beautiful piece of art featuring Joachim and Anne, and then Joseph and Mary and Jesus. So we have the different generations. Is that more or less the motto, those words, helping to pass on the faith and keep prayer at the heart of family life?
Absolutely, Joan. It's the only purpose that we exist. And it's very interesting for this first World Day of Prayer for Grandparents, because the theme that our Holy Father has chosen, I am always with you.
Yes.
You know, if you had to choose another mission statement for the Catholic Grandparents Association, that would be it. And it was so unbelievably touching yesterday when we heard Pope Francis give his homily and talk about I am with you always and the 3 S's. There were 3 verbs anyhow. There were see, share and safeguard.
That's right.
And I was interested because they were action words. Imagine Pope Francis having that sort of intimate knowledge of grandparents. He must have been so close to his own grandparents.
Oh, and he has actually spoken about a grandmother of his, so we do know that. And his words, by the way, when he can, in a homily or some kind of speech, he will have a triple theme. That is something the Jesuits are very good about. And usually that triple theme are action words, just as you said. You know,
but it's
see,
amazing.
Share, and guard. Yes, yeah,
and it's just the Pope Francis gets grandparents. That's all I can say. He understands us and he gets us. And those 3 words, actually, I was very tearful reading them because they reminded me so much. I only knew one grandfather, but they really reminded me so much of the touch of the hands, the seeing, the look that could calm you down. You know, when you were in trouble with your parents or whatever, that look, that gaze that just told you, it's all right, I understand, it's all right.
Exactly, because somehow Grandma and Grandpa, maybe Grandma more because they were always at home when you went to visit, but Grandma and Grandpa could hold you in their laps, they could hug you, they could give you that little kiss when your eyes were tearing up from some childhood disaster. And not that you didn't get the same thing from your parents, but the grandparents even seem to have more time to spend.
Well, I've always thought that there is a unique relationship between grandparents and grandchildren. And very often you have a better relationship with your grandchildren than you ever had with your own children. And God forgive me, but I find that now with my children, my grandchildren, I have more time. Sure. I have more understanding. And again, going back to the seek, the safe and the safeguard, I can just pat them on the hand or give them that look, and I know that it reassures them. And I know that when things go wrong at home, and again, this refers back to what Pope Francis said, they often have a stayover with me when things go bad at home and they want a break, you know. So that touch, that love, that feel that the generations bring together is completely unique.
Oh, exactly. And you know, Marilyn, I don't know if it's been your experience, but I remember my own mom, as the grandchildren were coming into her life, you know, she just sometimes couldn't get over the way that had the closeness and everything. And she realized one day it's because her kids were these children's parents. They were the disciplinarian. But grandparents don't have to be disciplined. They can be, but they don't have to be the disciplinarians. And that seems to make a difference in relationships.
Exactly. And even when we do feel like we need to discipline, we do it in a much more gentle way because we've learned the ways that really work and the ways that really touch you and the ways that will make a difference in their lives.
Oh,
and we
absolutely.
lead by example too, the way that we live our lives and the way that we conduct ourselves and the way our homes look. We become a domestic church, so they know that when they come into your house, they feel that welcoming. I say they feel your heart and your hands and your eyes. They feel everything through all those emotions that you show them, and feel that love through that.
Exactly. And I just remember the treasured moments of a weekend spent with Grandma. And then if Grandma came to stay with us, all 4 of us kids had our own bedrooms. My sister was the only one that had her own bathroom. So she had to give up, so to speak, her room when Grandma came, so she'd have her own. And then my sister would move in with me. But how much did we love Grandma? That was not seen as a sacrifice. It was like, oh my gosh, Grandma's coming this weekend. And there was always something, and the stories. Because this is one thing I would want to say to my great nieces and nephews, tell stories to your children. Have them ask you, have them ask Grandma and Grandpa about their roots. I sat down one day, actually a year before my mom died, and I used books that that her grandchildren had given to her, and you're supposed to fill in the blanks, your name and age and where you were born and what toys you played with as a child and what did you wear, did you have uniforms at school, 1,000 questions. And it was fascinating because obviously somebody born in 1913 is a very different figurehead to somebody who's asking that question in 1993 or in the year 2000. So I urge people, and I'm sure the two of you have done this, appreciate, and this is what the Pope said, and, if you want to even quote any of his words, to not only just appreciate them, but, when was the last time, if you're physically in the same town, when was the last time you went to visit grandparents? And if you're not in the same town today, we have all kinds of media. 2 of you are well-versed in it, and I think a lot of grandparents are well-versed in it. So, we did forget to say, at the Mass yesterday for this First World Day for grandparents and the elderly, the Holy Father, of course, had surgery on July 4th, so he did not exert himself. He is still convalescing in the Santa Marta residence. So Archbishop Rino Fisichella, who heads the Pontifical Council for promoting the new evangelization, he did preside at Mass and he read the Pope's homily. But the Pope did appear for 10 or whatever minutes it was, 12 minutes for the Angelus. So at least it was fun to see him that way. Now, let's go right to this World Day, the genesis of it. And it really comes from the 2 of you and Marilyn.
From this beautiful lady right here.
I was just from Catherine, I think.
This force of nature and visionary.
Oh, no, if you could plug Catherine in, you would not have an electric bill, let me tell you right now. So, but let's look at the genesis and the people that you've met in the Vatican, how this developed, how you've shared ideas, etc.
Joan, thank you very much for asking me that question, because the one person that I really, really wanted to speak to today, and I couldn't get my phone connected, was to a man called Monsignor Carlos Simon, who was the Undersecretary then to, I think, Cardinal Antonelli. We're really going back now a long time. Very first meeting for grandparents occurred after I went to the Vatican, when we asked Pope Benedict to write a prayer for grandparents. Because honestly, I had become a grandparent. I'm a cradle Catholic, Irish, from the cradle to the grave, and I'd never considered that my children wouldn't continue with the faith, that they wouldn't baptize my grandchildren. It never occurred to me.
Of course.
And so when I became a grandparent, my faith really kicked in. The need to practice my faith with my grandchildren, to show them the love that I'd learned from Jesus, from the generations before me, really, really kicked in. And that's probably the easiest way of saying it. So I wrote to Pope Benedict and asked him to write a prayer. And I didn't get a reply. Now, Joan, this sounds ridiculous. But after 3 letters, I thought, this is ridiculous. Why isn't the Pope
Is the Pope really that busy?
So I found out where the Dicastery for Marriage and Family was, and I went and paid a visit. And we had just had the first 2 pilgrimages for grandparents in Ireland and in Knock, and they had been incredible successes. And listening to the grandparents and their needs, which were exactly like mine, the fears that they were failing, that they didn't have the courage or the confidence, looking at the church situation and just lacking in confidence. I thought, well, we just have to do something. And I honestly couldn't find a prayer. So I went to Vatican and I knocked on the door, and I was met by a father called Father Lalonde. And to cut a very long story short, I gave him the poster for the pilgrimage. I showed him the 3 letters I'd written to the Pope. I explained I didn't know why I hadn't an answer. Maybe I was sending it to the wrong place. And I showed him the prayers that the grandchildren of Ireland were writing for their grandparents to honour them and to thank them, which was very holistic. It involved the school and the family and the church. I thought he thought I was mad. And then he gave me a cup of coffee from a vending machine. This doesn't sound very grand for the Vatican. And I said, look, I'm only here because I honestly believe that if the Pope sees the request to write the prayer for grandparents, he will. He will. And so I gave him the 3 articles, and I went away, and almost immediately I got a reply from the Cardinal saying what a wonderful, wonderful initiative this was, and how much devotion he had himself to St. Anne, and how he didn't know if the Pope would ever write the prayer, but he would certainly ensure that he saw the prayer. And I knew that if he ever saw it, he would write it.
Wow.
Then shortly thereafter, they held the very first meeting for grandparents in Rome, and they invited me as I think the Cardinal invited me because he was intrigued. And
he probably had studied what, your organization, the pilgrimages, what they had done, and everything was so effective. It was so positive.
I think he saw that the idea, he could
merit.
see way beyond me.
Yeah.
He was a wise, wise man.
Well, now that you're on the edge of your seat in this riveting tale told by Catherine Wiley and Marilyn Henry of how the first World Day of Grandparents and the Elderly came about, I have to tell you that's all the time we have this week. But come back next week as Catherine, who founded the Catholic Grandparents Association in the UK, and Marilyn Henry, who coordinates CGA in the US, tell us a lot more.
For more information on these stories, or to check out Joan's blog and to ask her a question, go to EWTN.com. That's EWTN.com. Thanks for listening to Vatican Insider on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.